Loren Tracy, United States Marine Corps, Korea. I interviewed Loren in Wichita, Kansas in November. It was November 15th, 2006, looking for stories from a Korean documentary which Loren is featured in. And I found him and some other Korean Marines and great stories that they told. Loren, we sat down for about an hour and talked and shared a gripping story of what happened to him as a young man, as a young boy in Korea. He enlisted at the age of 17 on July 5th, 1949. 2 months later in San Diego, September 10th, 1949, he graduates from boot camp. And about a month or a couple of weeks actually before his enlistment was up, the Korean War broke out in June of 1950. So he was called over to Korea. He fought many battles over there, as he will tell in this interview. And it's, like I say, a really enlightening story. I want to thank Brandon Glidden again for helping make these Korean War stories possible. Thank you, Brandon. So lest we forget, we never forget, lest they be forgotten. Thank you, Brandon. I've set up a special page. It's called Sponsor a Vet. And as you can see, there are many faces to these voices of history. Many men and women who have served our country over the years, spanning over 80 years of history, folks. I'm just going to take a moment here to sponsor a vet. What you're going to do is you're going to find this link in my video description. You're going to click on it, and it's going to take you to a page on my website which features a lot of the veterans that I've interviewed over the years, over 20 years now, 1,000 stories. I don't have all 1,000 on this page, but you can see some faces. And you just click on the face, it'll give you a little information about them, and you just adopt a veteran, as it were. You can sponsor a veteran's story. Just click on the link, it's very easy to do, and then you can take ownership in the story that you're sponsoring, and it will help my work and help us to get these stories out so our younger generations for sure can listen and learn about why we're free, the freedoms we have, and our veterans and what they fought for, and how freedom has been earned over the years and still is being paid for. So folks, I invite you to do that. Take some time and look at this webpage and help sponsor a vet. Let's watch Loren Tracy. This is a great story, like I said. I'm happy to share it with you here on the Voices of History channel. Share it with others. Subscribe to the channel, and let's keep this thing going, folks. Thank you, and God bless you. We're just going to talk about Korea. What year were you in Korea?
I arrived there in January of 1951.
Okay. And you were with the 1st Marine Division? Or?
I was with the 1st Marine Division, yes, the 7th Regiment.
Okay. What company?
Easy Company. They call it Echo now, but then it was Easy Company or E Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Regiment.
Okay. How old were you when you went to Korea?
I was 19.
Never been around combat before?
No.
Were you drafted? Did you enlist?
Now, I enlisted in July 5th, 1949. So I had almost a year's service before Korea started.
Tell me briefly, Loren, why did we get involved in Korea? What was going on?
Well, as a result of some politics after when World War II ended. Trying to pacify the Russians, I think. This is my opinion. I don't know all of it. But Russia came in to help us defeat Japan, supposedly. Actually, they were defeated when the Russians arrived. But they took over, the agreement was that they would set up a government in North Korea and help rebuild the country because the Korea Peninsula had been enslaved by the Japanese for several years, and they were nothing but slaves for them, and produced minerals and raw materials that the Japanese didn't have on their home island. So that was my understanding. But the Russians were supposed to set up a government, and instead they did, but it was their form of government, and they were rapidly spreading the communist regime through the Asian area.
So you actually physically went to Korea in 51?
Yes.
Do you remember what month?
It was the end of January,
Okay, so,
after Chosin Reservoir.
so where did you land? Where did you go?
I landed at the port of Pohang. Okay. It's on the East Coast, but not clear down on the tip at Busan. Okay. It was up the East Coast, just a short distance.
And so you come to Korea, and what's your rank at that time?
I was a private first class.
Okay, so are you in like a platoon or a company or what?
No, I was in a replacement draft.
Okay.
The 3rd, 4th, and 5th replacement drafts were scheduled to go to Korea in December, but the division narrowly escaped annihilation at Chosin Reservoir, and had pulled back to regroup down at Mason, which was close to, was on the East Coast, but south in the southern part of the peninsula.
So you came in because we lost troops at the Chosin?
Yes, the division was really depleted, not from necessarily combat, but frostbite and the conditions. But yeah, a lot of the troops had been in severe or intense combat, and there was a lot of losses from that. So the 3rd, 4th, and 5th drafts came over to almost simultaneous, just a month apart or weeks apart even in some cases, to bring the division back to full strength as quickly as we could.
What did you know about the Chosin Reservoir? Was it even called that at the time? Or, I mean, you get to Korea, did you realize that you're going up because of this depletion of the 1st Division? Or
yes. My first tour of duty, or the first 9 months of my enlistment, was up at the Naval Ammunition Depot on a security detachment. We only had about 80 people up there, but I had gone in on a 1-year enlistment with 6 years in the reserve, and that was my first duty station. So I was, Korea broke out the 25th of June. My discharge date for my 1-year active service would have been the 5th of July. So it's just a couple of weeks from from the end of my enlistment. I'd been out on a kind of a fire watch post at the Naval Ammunition Depot, which was out in the hills north of San Francisco, and arrived back at the base, and everybody was out on the veranda or a balcony that overlooked the parade ground when the Sergeant of Guard brought me back after relieving me from my post. Everybody was kind of down, sad. Usually they were very cheerful and ready to go on liberty, but something was different. And then I heard that North Korea had invaded South Korea, and the division was mobilizing, and the married personnel was to tell their families that they would be going to Camp Pendleton. After that, nobody knew. So, but in my case, in some of the other 1-year enlistments, they said, "We will discharge you guys. We're going to discharge you, and we're sending you home for 2 months, and maybe less, but we will recall you." So on my discharge, it said, "Convenience of the government," and not discharged for the end of enlistment.
So when you got to Korea, where were you, and was it cold like it was at the Chosin?
Yes.
Tell me about the cold that you experienced.
Okay. Of course, they brought us ashore. The ship couldn't come in all the way into the port, so they brought us ashore in an LST, which is a large landing craft, big enough to carry a tank or heavy equipment. So we were all packed in this hull of the LST, and it was cold, and the old rusty hull was, a lot of the equipment was World War II vintage. We hit the beach, and the ramp went down, and a cold, damp fog just kind of rolled in, and we disembarked from the LST, and it was a strange smell. It was just a strange feeling to step off of that thing, that ship, into the strange land like that, because not many of us knew much about Korea or even heard of it. But I was probably as familiar with it as anybody, because I grew up during World War II, and I always kept track of I was kind of an amateur historian. I followed the island wars, and I knew that the geography pretty well, so I knew where Korea was, but it was close to Japan. But that's about as much as I knew about it. It was a primitive land, though, and that's the impression I got was just a cold, damp, dreary, strange land.
Did you feel invincible as a young man, or feel cocky at all? And when did that all change?
Oh yes, from the time I graduated from boot camp. Of course, that's the purpose, is to tradition and nothing. You can do anything you want to do, and I don't know has it ever really changed. We've become more serious about the situation the longer we were there and exposed to the inhumanity of the war.
Explain that inhumanity of the war and who you're fighting over there.
Well, I'm not sure that I can explain it. It's something that immediately strikes you when at a particular time, and you say, this is real, I'm really here. And before that, you may see some wreckage of equipment, or some hear the artillery fire, but when you actually go into the assault phase, which we did in February, and that was called Operation Killer. It was the first offensive phase of the war after the Chosin Reservoir, because we rebuilt the division and we were ready to go again. Even the ones that had survived that, there was a few of them, but not many. But they were ready to go again. They were more cautious, and thank heavens they kind of guided us. The new people that were all hot to trot and slowed us down a little bit and say, hey, you guys, this is for keeps. So thank goodness, and we had a lot of World War II NCOs, thank goodness, because their experience in the islands was actually probably what saved most of us, because it was not a game, and we soon realized that. But it does kind of, it shocks you. I guess when it hit me was when we were moving out in this Operation Killer, and crossing the rice paddies, and there was a low dike separating the paddy areas, and we walked along that dike. But as I walked along there was a body of a Chinese soldier laying across there, and it's like a rag doll. He was all misshapen, and his legs were distorted, but he was face up, and he looked artificial, and I started to walk around him. The dike was very narrow, the path was narrow, and the guy in front of me just stepped over him like it was nothing, and so I just kind of hesitated a little bit, and so I stepped over him too. But I guess that was this is the guy that wants to get me. He's after me, and likewise, I'm going for him too. So that's when it really hit me. And then the night that we took our positions, the dog company had led the assault on this particular hill, and about sundown, the assault was called to a halt, and we set up a perimeter defense for the night. Well, I being new to the unit, I carried stretchers all night from the casualties coming off the hill from the assault company. So the next morning, we resumed the attack. We were the point of the attack the next morning, and I got hit about 11 o'clock later that day. Thank goodness it wasn't serious. It was bad enough, but I began to realize that, hey, bad things can happen to you here. But I did have a broken finger, and I was pretty close to the blast. How I ever escaped being wounded more seriously, I'll never know. It's a matter of inches, I guess.
So you're in combat for the first time, really, and what rank are you?
I was a PFC.
And you were a rifleman?
I was a scout rifleman.
Okay. So tell me about just some of the things that happened. Just some of the battles, the combat. What's the combat like there in Korea with the Chinese?
They were very disciplined soldiers. China had been at war. They were experienced. A lot of them had been at war with the Japanese, and then in combat when the communist regime overthrew the nationalist Chinese and took over the government of China, the People's Republic of China.
So tell me, you carrying an M1?
I was carrying an M1, yes.
Are you guys all up on a line? Are you in a foxhole? Are you charging? Are they charging you? Tell me about
my first couple of months. When I first joined the company, we were on patrolling, looking for guerrillas that had been bypassed during the first phase of the war, when that's what most people hear about is the first phase, the Pusan perimeter, the Incheon landing, the recapture of Seoul, and the Chosin Reservoir. Actually, the war raged on for 2 more years after that, so there was a lot going on. But started out these patrols, and it gave me a little experience being with the other people and learning a little bit of caution and how to react. Although we didn't really encounter a lot of guerrilla elements, it did give us a little bit of a foothold. And then when the Operation Killer and Operation Ripper started, we were actually in combat. We were on the offensive. And we were against the Chinese, who were very good troops, well-trained, well-disciplined. And then I was wounded just the first week that after the assault started. I was evacuated to Japan because I had a finger that was shattered, and luckily I just had rock pits and and rock fragments that they had to remove. But it took me. I spent 2 months in the hospital in Yokosuka, Japan, before returning to the unit.
So again, Loren, I'm trying to determine about the, I guess I've talked to a lot of World War II veterans and how they landed and they went in and did their thing in Vietnam, the guerrilla warfare. Now we're in Korea, so just give me some, do you have any stories about fighting as a unit, as a team? Did you have artillery support, air support? Did you actually have a major skirmish that lasted days, or was it just sporadic fire? Or what type of combat did you experience?
Right. After, when I returned to the unit, the Chinese had launched their spring offensive. We were online something like 72 days straight. Usually they tried to rotate the units, so 30 days or so was the limit, and they'd bring them back to the rest area, and at least they'd have some hot food or and resupply. But during this phase, the Chinese had broken through and was driving south again. Actually, it was the beginning of another Busan perimeter, is what it appeared to be. But we did manage to stop them, and that was called the Chinese Spring Offensive, and that's probably the longest time we were actually online actually in combat. But that was more of a defensive operation than later that summer. General MacArthur had been replaced, and General Ridgway had taken over command. And the whole purpose of being there had changed to a containment type of war. So General Ridgway's policy was to make the Chinese pay for coming into the conflict.
Did the Chinese charge you a day at night?
Yes, they were. They were excellent at fighting at night. In fact, they thought we were more vulnerable at night, and when they would send out patrols and try to find weaknesses or holes in the line, and then they would their strategy was to overwhelm the opponents, or try to open a hole in the line, and then get in behind the rest of the people and cut them off, create a panic situation. And so when they did charge, they made a lot of noise. They would blow bugles, and the commanders would control their troops with whistles, just like the traffic cop uses. And because they were well armed, their automatic weapons consisted of a burp gun, and it put out a lot of firepower, and they threw a lot of grenades. They were we called them potato mashers because they had a little wooden handle on on the end of them. A lot of them were concussion type grenades, but yeah, that was the type of combat that we experienced when we were trying to hold the line. And then later in the early fall, late summer and early fall, we took the offensive again. And that was probably where I experienced the actual intense combat. Our objective was, we had two hills, 673 and 749. And we were the assault unit, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines were the assault unit for that. And Colonel Nickerson had a plan that if we could, our main objective was 749. The 1st regiment was to go up 673. If we could get our unit behind the enemy, these were North Koreans this time, and they had a little different attitude than the Chinese. They were more fanatical, a little more daring. But as we went into the attack, we moved up a valley with a dry stream bed, and about 200 yards up this narrow valley with steep hillsides or terrain on either side, there was a narrow trail that followed the stream up, and we began to encounter mines. These were we call them shoebox mines, little wooden boxes with a explosive charge inside, and they were very difficult to detect in the rocky soil. But if we saw a little depression in the ground, we presumed it was a mine. So every step we took was was really tedious, and at the same time we had to avoid the snags on the brush and the rocks and so forth. But the mines were a big problem because the mine detectors couldn't detect the wooden boxes.
You said it was intense fighting. What do you mean by that?
Well, as we went up this valley, the mines began to go off, and then we began to get mortar fire because the enemy had this valley zeroed in with their mortars. Also, in trying to avoid the mortar fire, we'd get off the trail, and when we get off the trail, we got into the mines again. So it was pretty. A little farther on, as we approached our objective, we began to get small arms fire from up above us on the hillside. So we encountered a cluster of bunkers, and we're getting small arms fire, machine gun fire from those. Those bunkers, we presumed that they were calling in the mortar fire too, because they had a good view of the entire valley for a mile or more. And so our squad, 2nd Squad of the 2nd Platoon, Larry Presley, a veteran of the island wars, Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa, was our squad leader. So Larry was ordered to take our squad, his squad, to clean out these bunkers. and so the rest of the battalion could continue to advance. So we did. We crawled up the hillside. It was pretty steep, so it was difficult to keep your footing, and we were grabbing onto roots and whatever we could grab onto. And strung out into a skirmish line with the bunkers to our front. In front of my position, I could see 3 bunker positions. Just shortly after we spread out there and was kind of analyzing the situation, we begin to get mortar fire. And the last mortar shell that came in this barrage, a fragment hit me in the chest. Sergeant Presley called the corpsman over, and he looked at it, and he said, "Take a deep breath," and I did, and there was no bubbles or gurgling or anything. He said, "Well, it didn't penetrate the lung cavity," so, but started to write out they had these tags that they would hang on you when you were wounded and send you back to the battalion aid station. I said, "No, just, I'll stay here." I was fire team leader at that time. I had 3 people in my team, and I said, "We'll just wait a while and see." I feel fine. I'm a little shook because it felt like a sledgehammer slammed into my chest, but there was no blood to speak of. There was a hole in my blouse of my dungarees, but
So you were wounded again?
Yes, that was the second time. Yeah, right. So I don't know what happened. There was a break in the mortar barrage had let up, and everything was kind of quiet. So I told the rest of my fire team, I said, "Just cover me. You watch the bunkers on top, and you watch the bunker behind." So I moved forward and toward the first one and threw a grenade into it. This was probably about 25 yards into our front. Then I moved up to the next one and started to throw the other grenade, and an arm reached out of the bunker waving this piece of paper. Our planes had dropped surrender leaflets, and these were supposed to be safe conduct passes. So we gave them a chance to surrender if they chose to. And I guess this individual decided he'd had enough, and he stuck his arm out and waving this. So I called him out of the bunker and the rest of the platoon had started moving forward also. The other 2 fire teams in our squad, it was moving up above me, up higher on the hill, and clearing the bunkers up there too.
Loren, tell me about the Silver Star, what the citation was for a Silver Star.
Okay, that basically was what the citation read, that even though I was wounded, I continued to attack the objective and led the attack on this bunker emplacement.
Can you actually tell me the story, and not cite it, but just tell me where you were and what you did and what you're wounded and then you did this?
Well, I don't really know why. I guess the opportunity was there, and we needed to. We couldn't lay there and go through another mortar barrage, so we had to keep moving, and I had the opportunity, I had an opening to attack these bunkers, and the only thing I knew to do was, I actually didn't think much about it. It was just circumstances, I guess. And the injury wasn't all that bad. Did need to be treated, but I guess it was a matter of thinking that something needed to be done, and there was more troops in the valley that were getting shelled pretty heavy, and we just needed to keep moving, keep the attack moving.
Was it like Vietnam in the sense that, well, did you guys feel like you had a strong purpose of why you were there and what you were fighting for?
Yes, probably not like World War II, where our country was attacked. We were more to help the South Koreans. We had a commitment to defend them. And myself, it was more, I guess, devotion to the people around me. And I think that's the way most of them felt, I'm not sure. But this was an important part of any kind of military service, whether it's combat or otherwise, is to take care of the people you're with and develop some really close relationships. So,
and the camaraderie of the Marine Corps, just mention that. Tell me about that.
Well, this, I'm not sure I can explain it. It's something that when you're thrown together with all people from all walks of life, and then have to go through a life and death situation. You're depending on them, they're dependent on you, and even if you're in a defensive position, and every night there's a chance you could be attacked. So your partner, if he isn't awake when his turn to be on watch comes, you're in pretty bad shape, and he depends on you. So usually we paired off in 2 or 3 people and shared the responsibility for the others. But also the people all up and down the line depend on you. And this is what I told the younger guys when they came over, that we need you and you need us. So we take care of each other. And that was our philosophy. Then when it come time to rotate out or leave the unit for one reason or another, transfer to a different job or something, we just picked up and left. Goodbye, it's been nice knowing you. But years later, when I have a good friend who kind of got everybody back together just 5 years ago. All this time, 50-some years, and we began to get together, and we still had the same feeling. It's hard to describe, but they're like a family, sure. Brothers, fraternity, whatever.
Why do you think Korea is referred to as the Forgotten War?
Well, there wasn't a lot of notoriety. It wasn't on television every night. The people that were most concerned were the people who had family members or relatives that were actually fighting or stationed there, not necessarily fighting, but involved in the war. For a long time, it was called a police action, a conflict. But I can tell you, it was actually a war. If there is a definition of war, it came close to being that, fitting that description.
What do you think people should remember about Korea today?
Well, I had a chance to revisit Korea, and my wife, who was writing to me at the time I was over there, she was 5 years younger and still in high school. She said, "I think we should go." And I had mixed emotions. It was wasn't all that pleasant, and I was there because I had to be. So we went, and the gratitude of the Korean people was overwhelming. We had banquets every night. They presented us with gifts and just their gratitude, and seeing what they had done to that country. It's I don't know, very high on the economic scale. There's still a lot of animosity, I guess, about the Americans leaving troops there. But the older veterans, we fought with alongside the South Korean Army, and the KMCs, the Korean Marines, actually trained with us, and were usually, they weren't in the positions right next to us, but they were tied in with our units, and we knew we depended on them too. They were, but it's just my opinion that that gratitude that they're still free and they have grown and progressed meant a lot to me.
Okay, tell me, as we're kind of getting towards the end now, just tell me about the casualties in Korea. And did you lose friends? Did you lose them, wounded, killed? And how did you feel at the time?
Well, like I had been stationed with people before the war started that were sent over right from the beginning when the breakout from Busan took place. Had been recalled and was in training at Camp Pendleton for our replacement draft to prepare to go over. The Busan campaign was extremely hot and dry in the southern part of the peninsula, and I picked up a Saturday Evening Post magazine, and there was an article, "The Ordeal of Dog Company." They'd only were able to get 2 regiments or a brigade of Marines mobilized for that time. Later on, they began to call up reservists and so forth.
But Loren, tell me about the casualties where you were at.
Okay.
The ones that were wounded and killed around you. What do you remember about that?
Okay, my good friends that I'd been stationed with there before were written up. Several of them had already become casualties, and then when I was in the hospital in Japan, I received word that probably one of my best friends from even before high school had been wounded and was being sent to Japan. Well, I was preparing to go back to the hospital. I was in rehab. I was going back to the hospital to see how he was, when I got another letter from my mother that said he had died of his wounds. So it hit me pretty hard, and I said, well, because this individual had kind of confided in me when we left the ship and got on the LST. He said, I don't think I'm going to come back. I brushed it off. Nobody knows. He said, we'll have a case of beer when we get back. But sure enough, he'd been killed in May of '51 in Springfield. Another one that I was in high school with, and we were on the track team together, got married just before we left from Wichita. Before I rejoined my unit after being released from the hospital, my mother had told me that he had been killed too. So I was returning to my unit, and with these things bothering me a lot. But those were the closest. The people that I was with, actually, I guess you become kind of callous to it. We had two people from the mortar platoon had gone down in front of our position to get water and were captured. We sent 3 patrols out, one immediately after they were captured, and waited all night down there. And the enemy came back along that trail, and there was a firefight. Then we pulled back within our lines because we were probably going to draw artillery and mortar fire. The next morning, the spotters could see a body laying down there in that area. So we sent another patrol out, and it was frozen in the ground. So it was 3 days before we could recover that one, but the other one we never did know what happened to him. Another time, one of the men in our squad coming back off of patrol came through our barbed wire defensive position and tripped a mine as he came through. Just several artillery barrages usually took a lot.
What was the worst thing you saw over there, as far as the combat?
I suppose the worst thing is when you're in the attack and to move through an area that had been hit with our close air support. The planes would come in and strafe the ground, drop bombs, but the NMHOM was really the bad thing. The smell of the burning flesh and the clothing and the dried blood and the enemy troops was burned and distorted, and just to see that. But you just walk on through like the very first one I told you about. It's I guess that's what I mean by the inhumanity.
Well, being a Korean veteran and an American citizen, what does freedom mean to you, and the price for freedom?
Oh, there is. It's the most important thing, I think, in our lives is our country and our way of life. Until we find a different way to preserve that and defend it, and protect it and keep it for generations behind us. I guess we'll have to endure this. And I would do it again.
Tell me about what the American flag means to you and what it represents.
Yeah, the flag is a piece of cloth, but to me, it's much more than that. It's a symbol of from the time this country became a country, through the struggles that we've had, and all the people that experienced the same thing I did, maybe even worse. Or I'm sure a lot of it was worse than I went through. That is a symbol of their loyalty and patriotism. What they did for me, it kind of helps me feel that maybe I did something for somebody else.
Are you proud that you're a Korean War veteran?
Yes, I am. I'm not in the sense that I want to carry a sign around or anything, but yes, I think that we accomplished what we needed to. It was a sacrifice, not necessarily on my part, but others that didn't get to return home and hold their grandchildren and raise their families, and but still I think of them as they were then. They didn't have to go through the ravages of old age and arthritis and what a lot of us are going through now. But I think if they had it to do over again, they would feel the same way I did. It was something that needed to be done, and we did the best we could.
One more question I can think of. What should we remember about Korea today as a country, as a nation? What should people remember about the Korean War?
Well, I don't know the technicalities, I guess the political implications, but we really need to guard against making concessions, dividing people of the same race, and then putting ourselves in a position where we have to defend them or have to make up for some of our deficiencies. I think we just need to plan a little better and maybe do a little more talking to our enemies before we pick up the weapon. Just my opinion.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing that I ask all the veterans to, and
Okay.
you probably saw it in the film the other night, but when I tell you from where you're seated into the camera, I want you to give me a salute, okay? When I tell you to?
Okay.
Okay, Loren, right in the camera. Great.